welcome back to another episode of the Unsecurity Podcast. Your host, Brad and I, with Oscar Minks back again. Welcome back, Oscar.
Yeah, good to be back, Brad. How you doing, man?
Good. We're going to have to play Where in the World is Oscar Minks again.
Yeah, I'm back in Kentucky now. I do got a broken wing, but I'm healing nicely and doing pretty good.
Good. We also are joined by, what is your title? IR case? What is team lead? I don't know what you're
team lead. Yeah, team
okay.
lead. Yeah. Hey guys, yeah, I think the actual official title is longer than that, but our team lead works. That's what it is. So hey, everybody,
thank you for joining us. As is tradition, we do have to talk weather. You guys had some pretty rowdy weather there.
Yeah,
so you made it through there the last couple of days.
Yeah, stayed mostly south of us, but it was pretty rowdy. Just lost a couple trees. Still got part of it sticking out in the driveway because we only cut off enough to get by. And because, this part of the world, there's not a tree out here that's not covered in poison ivy. So it's going to be a nightmare to get it out of here without just getting covered.
Yeah, better you than me.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Meanwhile, I get to brag about our weather up here. It's like 65 and sunny and just absolutely gorgeous. So I'll take it.
Very nice.
All right.
Yeah, we've been dodging storms in Kentucky as well. I think I was really nervous going into the week. Got some PTSD from springtime storms last year that wrecked my property. We got lucky up here, and most of it went south or north of us as well. But unfortunately, a lot of that dumped on Tennessee, which thankfully Pinky didn't get hit. I was worried about him, texting him last night, and and some of it went north to us. There was some storms around the Indiana, Ohio area, so we got Seth up there, kind of northwest of me, and had a couple folks here in direct line of sight, but luckily I think we all got through just fine.
I'll take it. So, obviously, Pinky being here, we're going to talk IR, but before we get going, hit a couple of news stories real quick. I said this right before we started recording and it was 3 articles in a row. I'm not going to really go into them, but it's, 2 big IP, next central manager flaws that allow device takeover, Zscaler investigates hacking claims after data offered for sale, and critical F5 central manager vulnerabilities enable full device takeover. So, buckle up.
Yeah, so fun. I think a lot of F5s out there, so folks get on that patching. I do believe, Brad, maybe you can confirm this, they have released an update to resolve that. I don't know about the big IP, if they have a patch out for that yet.
I didn't actually read that one yet. I just saw it went, oh God.
Yeah.
So, and I know you had something with CISA you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so today CISA announced a vulnerability enrichment project that they kicked off called Enrichment. And so the goal of this is to hopefully be able to help people make more sense of vulnerability data. Some of the things they're doing is looking at the CVSS score, the KEV, so known exploitable vulnerability list that they already keep today. Also looking to see about the complexity value of the exploit. Is there an automated exploit available? Is there proof of concepts? All those good things to hopefully come out with a more meaningful score for people when they look at vulnerability data. That's something that we see, right? People, especially when they are really just getting into a vulnerability management program, is where do I start, right? And so I think the goal of the project is try to help people to prioritize and make a little bit of sense out of data that can be quite confusing. And I think the idea here is good. I do see some potential risks, and this is something that we talk about a lot here, is that the criticality of the vulnerability and exploitability of the vulnerability are important, but then also even more important to me is the classification and the criticality of the system, the criticality of the data that's on the system, and then also the availability of the system. And so, for example, if where this could lead to confusion, and the way I see this is if you're looking at a vulnerability scan and I see that, hey, I've got 10 servers that have, a critical vulnerability or the highest rated vulnerability, whatever they come out with in their enrichment program, then your gut is like, let's go fix those 10 first, right? But you may also have 3 other servers that just have high vulnerabilities that are exploitable as well, but those are public facing and they have sensitive data on them. And so I want to make sure people understand, like, let's look at your assets and your systems and be able to develop a prioritization of which are most important. Obviously, those that are on external perimeter that have accessibility from the internet are going to be of critical importance versus those internal. I think it's something, we always talk about, like these, we see a slew of vulnerabilities that are critical, but they only impact internal systems. Like, yeah, those are a problem. We still need to fix those, but let's be real here. If the attackers are inside your network and they have the ability to exploit those vulnerabilities, we've got bigger problems right now. So we should be focusing more on that initial perimeter defense and external attack surface defense.
Yeah, good points. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me nervous. I mean, actually, because I'm, as is tradition, right? I'm reading about this F5 vulnerability as you guys were talking about it. It's only a 7.5, right? It's a 7.5 on the CVSS score, but it's a, potentially bad thing. So I know it's a little off from what you were talking about there, Oscar, but at the same time, right? This is one that people may overlook, and because it is such a, it's a low. It's not a low, right? I guess it's a high. Per the terms, but a 7.5 people are, I've had these discussions with clients, right? And talking to people, it's like, oh, it's only an 8 or whatever. So we're not going to prioritize that until next month. But okay, yeah, but it's an 8 on a really critical perimeter system for you. That's a problem. Can it be chained with another vulnerability? What types of things are we looking at here? And so it does, I'm with you, kind of scared. I think it's a good thing overall, right? But it does scare me a little bit if that's kind of their source of truth for everything.
Yeah, I think I see the goal of the exercise here, as he says, to try to help normalize and make the data more easily understandable, which I support. I mean, we know that's one of the things that's broken today is like, we don't speak the same language. It's not easy to understand the data output. So this is a way to kind of normalize that and simplify that a little bit. But I think I just say that with a word of caution that this can't be your only source of truth. There are always other factors that should play into how we're prioritizing our remediation efforts.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's just so much confusion out there. If we can simplify it, that'd be nice.
Yeah, shameless self-plug too. We have a vulnerability management program that we began piloting with a couple clients. And the whole goal of that is to help educate people so they understand how to build these effective programs, normalize that data, and where to focus their efforts by making true risk-based decisions.
Yeah, I mean, even as professionals who do this all the time, I mean, every time a new vulnerability pops up, how many tabs do you guys have open on that one vulnerability?
God. So many.
It's 5 to 20, depending on the vuln, right? Trying to just piece together all the information and make it make sense and actually see how bad it is or, what it takes. And so anything to bring that to a more readable, user-friendly format, I'm absolutely all for. I think it's great.
Yeah, 100%.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I guess the short of the long, though, for listeners, check it out. It's going to be another tool. It's not the only tool. There is no easy button tool here. But also be warned, if you got a big IP or an F5 right now, get right on those patches because I expect there are likely active exploits going on today.
Yeah, I looked at the F5 one. Doesn't look like there's a patch yet, according to that article. F5 is saying restrict management access to limited users and secure networks. Great.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And they're likely edge devices, so good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same old thing, though. We say this every time. I have to say it again. Understand the patch is not enough. Patch the systems, but also we got to do a threat hunt to make sure you're not compromised. So make sure you're staying up to date on the IOCs related to these vulnerabilities. You know how to properly review your device for signs of exploit. And if you don't feel comfortable, holler at somebody you can.
Yeah, the F5 one looks a little scary because they can SQL injection to create hidden user accounts.
Yeah, why is that a 7.5?
Yeah.
So,
maybe it's based on complexity, but I don't understand the complexity of the exploit.
Right. Yeah, the big IP. Anyway, so going back,
both the big IP and the F5 are to create new admin accounts.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of the same logic flow here.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, not good at all.
So, thinking before you get hunting for admin accounts on F5 and big IP devices, do you have any? Everybody always loves hearing the IR stories. I mean, it's just because they're interesting, they're fun, and let's be honest, it's a little bit more fun hearing other people and not having to go through it yourself and learning those lessons. So what do you got for us today? You got a good one?
I'm glad you said that. I was gonna ding you on the fun thing. I mean, to be fair, it can be fun. Like hunting and finding things is often fun for people who enjoy that kind of thing. But it's always stressful.
It's probably top of mind for people, right?
Yeah,
because that's what most of our listeners are afraid of is, like, having that doomsday incident, having that worst day of your life, your career. And so I think that's why people are drawn to these stories. And like the work can be fun and rewarding when we're helping, through the eradication and containment. But I don't think anybody's really having fun.
No, not the people going through it. I meant from, it is fun for us finding those things, locking them out, helping somebody that there's a level there. But
I know the fun part for me and probably for a lot of the team too is actually the identification phase, right? Like you're digging for nuggets of information and trying to tie those together, and it's a puzzle, right? It's fun. I mean, some of us are those type of people. But yeah, it is kind of a horror movie appeal for folks. I think you've got that kind of like, let me hear about a story because it scares me, and that's kind of fun, I guess. So we do have one that was fairly interesting that came to us, and obviously going to anonymize as much as entirely here. So these are going to be very broad terms I'm using on a lot of this stuff, but it was one that we've theorized about for years. Going back as far as I can remember, we've thought about this as a possible attack avenue, but hadn't actually seen it happen in practice. And even because Oscar and I were both talking to these folks about this, and through our search, and we only found one instance where it ever actually got documented that this actually happened. And it was kind of a two-parter. The first one is around having internal domains, like Active Directory domains, that use an actual like routable top-level domain, right? So think you had an internal server called pinky.com or an internal domain called pinky.com. Well, you're not letting that route outside your network. No big deal, right? Like you've got everything locked down. It's internal only. Maybe it's in a VM environment or whatever. But the problem comes when something goes wrong and that actually does get out. Or you have, in this case, folks who were working from home on a VPN that was a split tunnel VPN. And so when they tried to access this internal domain, it was actually routing out through their home network connection. And so definitely a weird thing. It made me think about a few years back when Microsoft said they weren't going to renew the contoso.com domain, and that's plugged into everything by default in Microsoft world. And everybody was really scared about that, right? Because it's going to send authentication details, that kind of thing. So this is more of a real world example of that happening because some enterprising attacker went and registered that internal domain, or what they thought was an internal domain, to a real IP. And they were catching traffic there. So, there were a lot of details in that part of the process that I can't get into. But one of the things that came up from that too is that the attackers had also created a proxy auto config file, essentially. And so, as these users were going to try to hit these resources, their machine, if they had like a browser that was set to, like auto discover proxy or whatever the case may be, it was going out and finding this proxy config file to then route their browser traffic through another attacker server. And so you at least to us, the implications there are obvious, right? There's just a lot of things that could potentially be heading to an attacker server that you don't want heading to an attacker server. This one turned out to be mostly okay. They figured some things out and had some inner details that made this a little better. But yeah, it's just two things there that we don't think about very often as being kind of an attack surface that happened there. The first being, don't use routable domains internally. And that can be tough for people because new top level domains pop up from time to time. I can think of another example of like people using .in for internal. Well, that's a routable top level domain. So that's going to happen to folks. So you can't just rely on your internal controls for that, especially since we're kind of in a new world where a lot of people are working from home. You've got different situations there. And then the other was just around that proxy server auto configuration, right? Very handy thing if you've worked in an environment and doing IT and you had a proxy server that you need everybody to go through. But if you're not using that, get a group policy in place and turn that off. Don't allow folks to have that auto configure set up there.
Yeah. The other thing too is this is why we don't want split tunneling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge, for a lot of folks. Because then you're essentially routing everything your employees do back through you, and you got to have bandwidth to handle that, and you're gonna have to put some restrictions out there and things like that to make it work a little better. But so we do still see a lot of split tunnels, but I agree. My default position is always do not split tunnel. Like, please don't ever do that.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing really here is kind of reactionary to an ever-evolving work environment, right? And so if we can go back 10 years ago, this wasn't as big of an issue because primarily our workforces were in office, and you could use those routable domains in office without risk because you're going to be querying your local DNS servers. They're going to route there, and so that risk is kind of alleviated. But now if we've shifted more to this truly hybrid environment, then we see some of those things before that really weren't a concern becoming a more significant concern. And so I think this is a good learning opportunity for everybody to think about how you are using internal only domains. And really the big thing, we talked about is if you are going to use publicly routable domains for internal only resources, the key here and really the remediation step is to purchase that domain, right? Own the rights and the routing for that domain. So that you don't ever have an opportunity for a malicious account takeover or malicious domain takeover, like in this instance. And I think even more so too, this is kind of like speaking a little broader, but something that we've talked about for years, and that is enumerating phishing domains. So same lines, right, of your internal domains, but using tools like DNS twists and URL crazy to enumerate all the possible variations that attackers may use to target your domain. Buy those domains too. Domains are really cheap, and you can buy those domains and essentially sinkhole them and block them at your perimeter, so there's no way that any malicious traffic utilizing those can ever come ingress and egress, specifically like to users' inboxes here. And it's a great layer of protection for your business with a really minimal investment.
Yeah, absolutely. One tricky thing there too to remember, and it is more okay on the internal side, but keep in mind subdomains on that too, right? Do you have srv1.pinky.com in your environment? And if so, you're going to need to map that one to something, right? I mean, as opposed, you don't generally have to buy the subdomains, but whenever we're setting that up on that domain, put DNS entries in there for that as well to route that to nothing or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, and I think really good point too, Pinky, that just make sure everybody heard is like WPAD, Web Proxy Auto Discover, very useful service if you're utilizing that and you have those configurations in your environment. But if you're not, shut it down. And this goes back to the old school principles of, disabling services you're not using, period. And I think I see less and less focus on that now. I feel like people are like, oh, we kind of won that battle. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's not true. Our workplace is continuing to evolve. So we should continually be assessing those services that are active in our environments and shutting down things that are unneeded and are not currently being utilized.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with the newer versions of Windows. I mean, 10 had a lot of services on by default. I mean, working our cases, how many times have we had guys that are chasing down the Xbox Live user service that's running on a Windows 2019 server? Like, why is that even there? You know what I mean? And like Microsoft's gotten, honestly, they've always been bad for this. It was always kind of their gripe, even back in the 90s. This was a complaint about Microsoft and why they go Linux over Microsoft and things like that. But it's just continuing to kind of get worse. They just keep enabling more things. And it's quality of life things. I get it. You want to be able to connect your Xbox to your machine and easily and all that stuff. That's great. But for the love of all things, like, why is that on a server? Why is it on a server 2019, right? Like,
this can't get PowerShell logging turned on by default.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like one of the more useful things in an attack is PowerShell logging. We've all been yelling about it for years. Turn that on. But It's cool though. They've got time to turn on the Xbox Live service. They'll just leave that running for you. I'm still not sure why we haven't seen that thing exploited yet. I mean, we've. It's so suspicious looking.
They're waiting.
Yeah, I know, right? It's so suspicious looking.
The next Xbox release is when we'll see the wave of attacks using it.
We probably just put it out into the ether, and now it's going to be a thing, and that's all we're going to be dealing with for the next year. But is what it is. At least we'll know.
Oh man, I know. I saw what just kind of reinforcing about the need for logging and stuff. I saw one of the guys say that I guess one of the cases that PowerShell and Java was discovered and run back in February, and they're just seeing that. So that's another reason logs. People always say, how long do I need my logs?
Yeah. As
long as it's going to take you to find something.
Right. I mean, my default is always, I want to say absolute bare minimum of 6 months. I'd really like to see a year. And this is a blanket statement. I'm not talking about any specific log. I'm talking about all your logs.
Yeah.
Just logs. Can you log it? Okay, I want a year of it. But yeah, that one in particular, the guys were looking at it, and this does bring up kind of a point from some other cases we've been working lately, where logs are just gone when we get in to investigate. Now, one of those is because the threat actors encrypted at the VMware level, so the servers were just completely encrypted. They wouldn't boot, right? I mean, that's just gone. But even still, like when a ransomware attack happens on a Windows server, generally they leave the system directories alone, so your logs are usually there. We do see log clearing from time to time, but that generates a log in and of itself to say that logs were cleared, and that's an artifact that we can look at. But we've ended up in a few situations where something happened 5-6 months ago, and we can see the remnants of that. We know that it occurred because of some other log or some other artifact we found, but the useful logs are gone, and they've not been offloaded, or whatever the case may be. So, as always, right, like a push for a seam, or at least some log aggregate. Even just store the logs somewhere, safe and secure, of course, but just offload those logs somewhere that's not going to get hit in a ransomware attack, because then we have nothing to work with, and we end up in this position of a client asking us, are our servers clean? Well, we don't know. Like it's hard for us to make that determination because we don't have any kind of logging. It's like we can put tools on there and monitor for a while to ensure that it looks good, but our hands are really tied on what we can look for there. It just it could be a much faster process to say, hey, yeah, that server looks good. Everything in the logs for the last 6 months is totally clear. It's fine. Bring that one back online, as opposed to bring it online and let's monitor it and let's hope for the best kind of thing. So I don't like being in those positions. Don't put me in those positions. Anybody that's get your logs right.
So yeah, Pinky, I'm just thinking a little bit here. We we celebrated Breachmas with the reading of the Not Before Breachmas at the end of last year, and that was a lot of fun on the Hackle Box. And we kind of prayed that it wouldn't be true, but I feel like it's been very true. It's been very real, and Breachmas is probably still going on as we start to head into the summer holidays here. And we'd never want to be the ones who are, causing panic or paranoia. But I will say, like, the volume of casework that we've seen this year is significantly higher than it has been in past years as well. We don't see that slowing down either. And we are approaching, the summer holidays coming up here. So people probably need to be on alert around those times. Attackers like to target during the times we may be distracted or away. But considering the volume of casework you guys have had this year, are there any trends or anything specific where you're saying, like, hey, we've had a high volume of BECs or ransomware attacks are on the rise, or what's the thing? Maybe if you got two things to tell folks to kind of be on the lookout for as we approach that season, what would it be?
Yeah, so we have seen exactly that, a very high volume of business email compromise. This latest wave kicked off around November. And we kind of talked about that back then. I think like things were ticking up in November, right around Thanksgiving. We expect that every year. Like, that's not new to us. We know that's going to happen. What has been new this year is that wave ticked up around Thanksgiving and has not let up. And it's been a very high volume of BECs. We've actually seen less ransomware cases in the last 5-6 months than we normally do. I will say the ones we have seen have been exceptionally destructive, though. So kind of on those 2 points, right? The email compromise, I'll circle back to the ransomware in just a second. The business email compromise, we're still seeing, and this has been the trend for a year and a half or more, almost every BEC attack we see uses something like evil proxy. That was the man in the middle email compromise attack. You guys have probably talked about it. I know we've talked about it on Hacklebox, but just a really quick high level. It's essentially a link off to something, a website that is maintained by the threat actors. But it actually, inside of that page, will bring you the real Office 365 or Gmail G Suite login. And so you'll enter your username, your password. It prompts you for MFA. You enter MFA, and you get dropped off in your inbox, just like if you were logging in normally. The only real difference that you could potentially see there is in the URL bar. You're going to be at something that isn't, office.com or microsoft.com, whatever. And so what they're doing is they're proxying your connection over to that site through their attacker site. And in doing that, they're able to capture the successful authentication token. So after you've entered all your credentials and everything, Microsoft generates a session token for you that says, hey, you're authorized to see things in Microsoft. It's the reason you don't have to log in every time you click something inside the portal. And so they capture that token, that works, and then they go back to their hacker system and use that to log back in and do their mischief. So this one, there are some technical controls for this, but they're kind of limited. The biggest thing for this one is user education, right? If you click on a link from an email that you think is taking you to Microsoft or wherever, look at that URL bar before you start typing anything. Just got to educate folks on this. The technical controls are the ones that I've seen as a potential option for this are pretty extreme. Like one that will work generally is to have highly, highly restrictive conditional access policies that say it has to be a company-owned device. It has to be within the U.S. It has to be within my city, even, some really restrictive thing, which then eliminates the ability for people to use like Outlook on their phones and things like that. So it gets really tricky when you're trying to technically correct for this one. And that's why this is so successful. I mean, I always estimated it at 95% of the BEC cases we work. It may be higher than that. I'm just trying to add a little wiggle room there, but it's pretty much every one of them. And then another one we see that pops up with that is a cloud app called Perfect Data. There's a lot of information on this one out in the world now because other firms are seeing it, that kind of thing. But if you have a BEC, check those cloud apps. Make sure you know everything that's there. Mm-hmm. Did you have a question? Something real quick?
No, I was just going to say, I think that's a good opportunity for our people who are listening and trying to defend. Like, I completely agree. This really falls back on user education, but there are some options like in the M365 portal now. So you can get alerting if there is a new device added to your environment, or you can get alerted if there's a new authorized application. And so while the preventative controls are kind of cumbersome or difficult to implement, I think at least I would recommend everybody to make sure you have that level of alerting enabled so you are quickly notified if there is a new device or application that's been authorized, and investigate each of those, right? You should be validating every device that has access regardless. And so this is another just best practice that now you got a real reason why you should start to act upon it.
Well, yeah. Think about it. You shouldn't be getting a whole lot of alerts, right? So this shouldn't be creating a lot of noise.
Right. Yeah, it should be pretty limited on the false positives there. And that's something I always remember people, we're doing testing with people and we tell them to, turn on some alerting if you see somebody run, who am I all, right, from PowerShell or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, that happens all the time, right? No, it doesn't, and not for normal users, right? So things like that, or like, netsh commands, things like that, they're seem really common to us nerds who do things like that from time to time, but if you see that on a user workstation, it's a problem. So just kind of managing that alert fatigue versus what you can see kind of thing there. The other point I wanted to hit was just on the ransomware thing. Like I said, the ones we have been seeing are really, really destructive. In particular, the Akira ransomware group has been super active over the last few months, and they're pretty fond of encrypting at like the VMware level, VMDK files. They love to do that, and that way you can't see what's going on. So it's a big nightmare if you have a fully virtualized environment, which a lot of people do because it makes sense. But just something to be aware of there. Again, though, these always start somewhere else. Unless you've got your VMware server exposed to the internet, which please don't. Generally there's a compromise somewhere else in the environment, like Oscar was talking about earlier. Once they're inside, we've got a bigger problem there. So that's been the main thing there with ransomware, at least over the last few months.
Yeah, and as we continue to see, and I think that's the trend, right? We will see more and more destructive ransomware here because it does increase the likelihood of victims paying that ransom fee. But I think it still goes back to the basics, man. I don't think a lot changes based upon what we tell people to do. It's, again, really looking at your backup strategy here in this situation. And so thinking about how you're offloading those backups, I would suggest making sure you are doing backups at the VM level. So you have those VMDKs backed up and stored somewhere in offline storage. Then if you have this type of destructive attack, you can recover. I feel like we've been screaming that for years now. And, I know it's difficult. I know it's cumbersome. But the reality is, if it happens to you, then your chance of recovery is extremely high versus if not, it's extremely low.
Yeah, I feel like I rant about this every time I come on here, but, offsite is not air-gapped. So keep that in mind. Think about truly, can an attacker access this if they were to get a high level of access? If the answer to that question is yes, then you don't have protected backups.
Right. I'm not going to say who it is, but I was able to get one of my customers. They have the local backup. They have it offsite that is air quote immutable. But then they had some old storage they were retiring, but it was still fully functional. And they connect it every, I don't remember if it's quarter, I think it's every quarter, run a set of backups and then pull it off the network. Mm-hmm. So they've got two, and then, oh crap.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what you have to do.
And some of the immutable solutions are really good. Like, I have encountered a few that I'm pretty impressed with. That said, though, there's like we always say, there's not a silver bullet, right? So, I mean, in this case, the silver bullet is kind of that, finding some way to pull those backups off. They are disconnected. They are sitting in a vault, or whatever the case may be. It's really hard for an attacker to get at those without actually breaking into your building, and that just doesn't happen a whole lot in these types of attacks, anyway.
Yeah. You just said something that reminded me, and I know, thinking of just about our history of casework, and if we went back to 2 to 3 years ago, a lot of our BECs were people who had single-factor authentication, right? And so we did have that push, and I think that's been an industry-wide push at this point. Like, you have to multi-factor everything. And I do remember that time, and I have talks from that time period to echo this as well. But the key thing was, hey, it's not a silver bullet. It's better than nothing, but it's not a silver bullet. And we had some examples of how to defeat then, but we expected there would be an evolution of that. And we saw the evolution through Evil Proxy, and now Evil Proxy is going at full steam ahead again right now. And so just kind of reiterating that there is no silver bullet, right? We just do everything that we can do to try to protect ourselves in these situations. When we talk about backups and backup disruption, it's hard for me to say, like, yeah, that is your silver bullet, but it's damn close. It's probably not a true silver bullet. Like, there are options or opportunities there where, like, maybe they time bomb those backups, and if they're brought online at a date later than next, then they're going to self-destruct. But however, it's the closest thing we can get to a silver bullet in that case, and there's no reason not to be doing that today.
Yeah, and I think the other thing here is we're always playing from behind, right? We're having to react to what they're doing. So you got to put those fundamentals in place, do the basics correctly, and they're always evolving, and we're always having to react to that next evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you're following good foundational concepts, though, like you're mentioning there, get the basics, it makes it a lot easier to either stay ahead or stay pretty close and then jump ahead when you need to. Because even still, even when we see MFA defeat techniques and stuff like that, right? If you were following good practices before that, you had a good, take Evil Proxy, for example, right? You had a good program to educate users, that kind of thing, right? You can at least make them aware that this is a possibility, or you could do it really quickly. And that's not to fault anybody. These are extremely convincing, right? Like, I mean, they're very convincing because it's very tough to see what's going on there. And especially when you log in and you go straight to your email, you don't think anything about it. Like, there's not even a reason to report. Like, everything was fine. So it's tough. But that good education, teaching people good habits, that kind of thing, right? The other part of what evolved there too was that oftentimes these types of BECs come from a trusted partner, somebody that you work with regularly who got compromised the same way, and then the attackers are blasting out emails from them to you. So you're like, oh, I got an email from Brad. He's got a document for me to look at. Let me go take a look at it. And you just don't think of it. It doesn't raise any flags. And we saw a lot of that a few years ago, but it's definitely a huge part of BECs now. Most of the ones we see again are that scenario. It's from somebody they knew that didn't know that they were compromised.
Fun.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us today. You've been on enough that I'm gonna drop it on you. We're gonna do our shout outs at the end of it. So who you got?
Yeah, normally I do give the whole team a shout out, and I mean, in general, yes, the whole IR team. But did want to give Corey on our team a little special thanks. He's been killing it, been doing a lot of casework, been doing a really good job on it, and then also ran our internal tabletop yesterday. And to his credit, even though I've ran a million of these tabletops, caught me off guard, had me reeling for a minute. So good job for him. I was impressed, and he called me out on something that I should be doing that I wasn't doing, and it's good job, man. Thank you. So
you know
give
what?
Corey some love.
I'm gonna give Corey love because he made your life miserable. I'm all for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
How about you, Oscar?
I have to admit, Pinky stole my shout out there. I was going to shout out Corey. He did a fantastic job yesterday at our internal tabletop, which was a lot of fun. But I also want to shout out Brett. Brett's our internal security analyst who's been focusing on essentially, ensuring that we're taking our own medicine and we're doing everything that we should be doing. And he's done a fantastic job there. To see his performance, he's been in the role since the beginning of the year, how far he's came in such a short manner. Really impressed with his work. He's done a fantastic job, and it was good to see those that knowledge and those skills get to go to action in our tabletop yesterday.
Yeah, he's been fun to work with. He's been using me as a resource as he's coming up to speed, and the questions get better and more difficult. So it's always a good sign when he's getting those things.
For sure.
Yeah, I'll give my actual shout out. I'm gonna give it to Lori. She's been here 6 years, almost 7 years, I think, something like that. So shout out to Lori and all the help that she's been providing to the team and knowledge transfer.
Yeah, I love that. Lori's awesome. She's an amazing human being.
Totally agree.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, we will talk to you guys next time.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.